I want to tell you about a young lady that I met in Baltimore. She was short, just like me. Really petite. Had a short crop hairstyle. And I thought she had, a nice disposition. And I met her at an organization that serves homeless women. It just so happened that this woman was a sex worker. And it was my job to, kind of listen to her story, ask her questions. I was working on a project, a research project. And so this was about 15 years ago I met her. And she told me about her upbringing. We were there to talk about, unfortunately, her experience with child sexual abuse. She's an African American woman. And she told me about growing up with her father, her mother, and I cannot remember now how many siblings, but it sounded like quite a few of them. And she talked about the manipulation tactics that her father used to make her seem like a liar, a thievish person, and someone basically who couldn't be trusted. So he manipulated things so that amongst all the other siblings, he would always point out something she had done, or he would always blame her. Or if she defended herself, he would say, yes, you did it, and I saw you do it, even if he didn't see her do it. So he manipulated everything so that he probably was, getting himself some, I guess you would call it insurance, for if one day she ever told what was going on and that her father was raping her, he could say exactly what he said, that she was a liar. And so when she told, her mother called her a liar because, he's built up this history of her being someone untrustworthy. And her mother thought she was trying to break up this happy family. And her mother packed her up and sent her to live with her aunt. And so here it was, I don't know, decade later maybe, not even that really. And she was living as a sex worker on the street and, without a home, homeless. So I don't think, in talking to her, I got the impression that it wasn't something that she ever got past. She was never able to get past the fact that she felt abandoned by her mother, her siblings, and manipulated and raped by her father. And there's a reason I'm telling you that story. And I'm going to come back to it. Because I want to take you back to a time, 2016. Summer 2016. And we were a proud country. For one thing, we had the best gymnastics team in the whole wide world. And then I think summer 2017, so like a year later, we began to find out that those girls were being sexually abused. And Allie, I believe you say Ratzman? I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce her name. Allie was the first one to come forward from that team, from the 5 girls that we loved so much, the American team, and, courageously say that she had been sexually abused by the team doctor. And unfortunately, in that conversation, Gabrielle Douglas decided to weigh in. And I say unfortunately because it went very bad for her, actually. She wasn't supportive like the rest of the team members. The rest of the team members were extremely supportive. I think they talked of her courage and, I know, generally as a collective country, we felt kind of bad for her. I mean, felt very bad for her. That we were watching her do all this and We had no idea that this is what she was going through. None. And so, but Gabrielle took a different route. Gabrielle decided to victim blame. Gabrielle said, something about modesty, the standard modesty, and maybe if she had done this, that wouldn't have happened, that type of thing, which was extremely inappropriate. And Gabrielle garnered a lot of criticism for that, for taking that stance. And I think that was appropriate that she, was criticized. And then there were about 2-3 days later, I was hoping that the criticism would die down, tremendously, because Gabrielle revealed that she too was sexually abused by the teen doctor. And some people had a lot of compassion for her. Some people understood. Some people didn't understand at all. As a matter of fact, I began to write on one of my social media accounts. I began to tweet about how we should proceed with compassion, because sometimes understanding survivors is a very tricky thing. And maybe it's not even just survivors. I think understanding that healing path it's challenging to understand. It's because it's challenging for us to, as survivors, to tell you about it. And also, quite honestly, people don't do a lot of listening to domestic and sexual violence survivors. People should listen, but they don't. And so it often comes as a surprise when we talk about certain aspects of being a survivor. And so I think people were used to me being standing on the side of no victim blaming will be tolerated. And yeah, I still felt that way. And at the same time, I felt that when Gabrielle revealed that she was a survivor, there were some things that I understood. And I'll tell you why. You ever heard of that? I know maybe you're familiar with that poem, Children Learn What They Live. It's by Dr. Dorothy Law Nolte, maybe. Y'all, I'm bad with pronouncing names. So anyway, the first line is, if children live with criticism, they learn to condemn. That's the very first line of that brilliant poem of hers. And so I identified with Gabrielle Douglas, and I also identified with the sex worker from Baltimore, because I, am a survivor, and I, was manipulated as well. That was a tactic. It's a common tactic, but it was definitely a common tactic that was used against me. And I had to, and let me back up a little bit. I needed to answer the question, because when I posted that on social media, I got a lot of criticism for my take, and I don't mind criticism. However, when it comes to sexual and domestic violence, often I will address it, because that's a social issue. And I just think with more knowledge, we could do better for survivors and families and the like. So anyway, I was asked a brilliant question, really. A guy I follow, and he follows me, he asked me, he said, I get it that she's a survivor. I get it. But you guys are really, going out of your way just to defend your faves. And I'm just wondering, how hard is it just to be a good person? How hard is it just to be a good person? Now, I'm going to tell you, I thought that was a good question. And I actually told him, I said, you know what? I'm going to have to write a piece. Didn't know I was going to record this. But I said, I'm going to have to write a piece and explain to you why I hold this position. I don't, you think what you want to think. But I need you to kind of understand why I identify with that, because the healing process is very ugly. The end result is beautiful. It's fantastic. the smiling, the this, the that, the joy, the can't wait to get up, all of that. But going through those suicide attempts and the sinning and your personality sometimes is not the best, and going through all these things because you're in so much pain. And so my answer to that, to how hard is it to be a good person, is this. That depends on your lived experience. And here's what I mean by that. Because my lived experience was also filled with condemnation. And so I was definitely one who offered a lot of unnecessary criticism to people. My empathy level, I don't think it was what it could have been. I happen to have been raped by 3 different persons over the course of my childhood up to the age of 13. The first person was a relative somewhat, but he was he was fostered into the family. And so he was fostered in, he was a teenager. I was a very small child in elementary school. And, he used some of those same tactics that the wonderful woman I met in Baltimore's father did, the tactics of always, getting me in trouble for things that I didn't even do. And, teasing and trying to get other girls, silly stuff, getting other girls on the playground. She thinks she's cute and now you're getting beat up, those kind of things. And then the second person was an adult in our family. He was babysitting us. The same thing, same tactics. There were things we got in trouble for that we never did. We never did those things. And so that was a lot of, condemnation. And eventually your self-esteem begins to take hits because you begin to feel like, I don't care what I try to do right, it's going to be wrong. And I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get blamed. I'm going to get fussed at. And what I say just sounds like a bunch of childish excuses to get out of trouble. And your self-esteem begins to take a hit. A big one. A big one. And so by the time the third man came along, he was also in our family. Married in. He actually told me he recognized that I had low self-esteem, and he actually asked me if I had been abused before. And this is something I had never told anyone. But sharks, I'm going to tell you, they can find some blood in the ocean. I'm telling you. So, he knew. And he played on that. And he played on it, and he played on it, and he raped me. Several times. And it wasn't until I was 13 years old that I came forward and I told about this stuff. Right away, I was placed in therapy. Right away, I had a therapist. Right away. And so I tell you that about the 13 right away had a therapist because, come along, I was 16 years old. And a news story came on the news. Young girl, where I grew up, there was one high school. So, when it came on the news, the girl in my high school was being, the news said, in a relationship with a teacher. And a relative asked me about it, Auntie said, do y'all know that girl? And I saw her picture, and it was the first time all of us were hearing about it. And we didn't have social media. So, I think, we all got on the phone and stuff like that, but no, we didn't hit social media. But yeah, we were definitely surprised. We were shocked. We knew the teacher. We knew of her. It's one high school. So I said at that time, yeah, I know her. And, and my auntie was talking about how much of a tragedy it is that these men, prey on young girls and this, that, and the other. Well, here was my take. My take was, these young girls are so fast. Always up in these guys' faces. And I'm going to tell you, that's something I had heard a million times. I had heard about girls being fast my whole entire life. So I was basically just parroting what I've heard. And it's somebody who would, nobody called me on it, but everybody knew what I had been through. Everybody in the family knew. But she did, she corrected me. Let me let you know that. She corrected me and said, that's a man. She said, that's a grown man. That's an adult. He should have known better. She's a child. But the reason I said that, even though I was a survivor, just like what Gabrielle Douglas said about her teammate, the reason I said that, I had learned it. I had learned that the burden of sexual violence falls on the victim. I had learned, even though I had spoken out and I had gone to counseling, all this wonderful, wonderful stuff. But I'm telling you, wasn't nobody happy that I came out about it. Nobody blamed me or nothing like that. It's just silence. No one knew what to do. They just didn't know. They loved me. They didn't know what to do. And so, for me, I was always trying to assimilate and pass as a non-survivor. As a non-survivor. I was trying to pass. I was trying to say what would help me fit in. Because I hated being different. I hated how I felt. I hated what those assaults did to me. I hated what those rapes did to me. I hated that people knew. I hated it. I hated it. I hated every second of it. And I know that people say, well, you were 16. Gabrielle was 22. Let me tell you what I told my therapist at 22. Round about that age, I was in therapy telling them, I don't like people. I don't trust people. It took a little while for the therapist to dig in and figure out maybe why do you think that? Well, yeah, I've been hurt. Okay. But the other part was, if people saw, if people saw who I really am, they would be disgusted by me. And that's what I thought at 22. I did not think people were trustworthy. I did not think people were likable in general. I did not think people would like me if they knew the real me. And so when I talk about layers of therapy, understand how long. That was 22, I'm 45. It takes a long time, sometimes, not all the time, but in many, many, many cases, it's not just about what the acts that were done to us, the disgusting, vile, scummy acts that were done to us. That's stuff you can put people in jail for. No one goes to jail. But I'm just saying, that's the stuff you can put people in jail for. But what you can't put people in jail for is damaging your self-esteem. Is making you despise yourself. Is making you blame other people because you think if we could that somehow we had control over this. It's all my fault. You think that. You think if you'd have worn some clothes, nobody would have done anything to you. And yeah, you wore all the clothes you could, but you still think that. You think if you hadn't smiled, you think everything except to blame the person who did it to you. And so my thought then was that Gabrielle Douglas was trying to, maybe subconsciously, I don't think consciously, because I wasn't doing it consciously that day, perhaps trying to pass as someone who had not gone through the devastation that she went through. So how hard is it to be a good person? That is a beautiful question. It's a great question. But I have the answer. It depends on your lived experience. It depends on what people said to you about who you are, about your value, and about your worth. And that includes the people that attacked you, the people that were wrong to touch you, to look at you, to do the things they did to you. It depends on your lived experience. So let me close this on now. Y'all don't have all day. I just want us to remember that at all times, when we're dealing with survivors, let us proceed with compassion, because a lot of us have done this for a long time. And every day we get up, and the exciting thing even to me is that I learn something new every single day. Because my experience is not the end all be all. It's just part of it. But as survivors, we tend to put all our pieces together to come up with these answers. So, yeah, I think that's my parting thing. Proceed with compassion. Because this healing thing is not guaranteed. We lose so many people to suicide and substance abuse and all types of things. We lose people. This ain't no, you know what? Some of us, you see the smile, you see this, you see that, you hear us joking. Listen, this ain't this. You see us. You see folks winning gold medals. But people, this ain't no easy thing. Not by a long shot. Not even by a long shot. So, finally, I just ask you to proceed with compassion. And, you know what? Thanks for listening. All right. Y'all have a great one.